What's the most hilarious, awful thing an employer has ever said to? Applied at Pods in 2019. In the very first interview, they said that there was a substances test. I told them I was a medical substances patient and there was absolutely no way I'd pass. They said that would be fine since I was working in their call center, and we went through the entire process. I got hired on and got all my paperwork, filled it all out, and put a notice at my current job, and then had quit the day before I was supposed to start at Pods. 18 hours before my shift was going to start, they called me, said that I failed my substances test. I told them, "You all said it was fine if I sent you my medical card," and had me sign all the paperwork. Their reply was, "Well, that's not the case now," and hung up, leaving me without a job for 3.5 months while I tried to find a new one. Story 2. Wait, there's a problem now? At the last update, you said there were no issues. Were you lying to me? When informed of a new issue that had come up. Story 3. Was waiting to get a physical check 3 jobs ago. Employer didn't have cash to cover payroll and didn't even bother to issue checks that week. When asked how he was supposed to pay his mortgage, the operations manager told the guy in front of me, "You should budget better. Your finances aren't my problem." He almost punched her in the face. Saw him close his fist and pull it back before he got control. Story 4. Complaining about not being able to travel abroad during COVID. Hawaii's so boring. You can only eat macadamia mahi so many times before it gets old. She was paying me $15 an hour at the time. Not exactly vacation in Hawaii money, sort of few. I was working part-time at a fruit store, and I was going to my manager to find out what I could do to get to full-time, and my crap manager said, "Well, Amazon is hiring. Like you're supposed to help me develop, not throw me away. Duck you, Robert." Story 6. Well, I see why you left. We never were going to promote you here. After I did a ton of work and sent over a business proposal for a promotion I wanted. Also, they used my ideas and hired someone else to do them, and people wonder why I can't stand corporate. Story 7. It's a shame that happened, but when can I expect that he's replacement to be on site? From a client about 30 minutes after finding out my superintendent just passed in a car crash. Story 8. When I was 16, I worked at KFC making $4 an hour and leaked an 8-header by accident. Oil all over the floor at midnight. I tried to clean it until 4 a.m., but there was just no procedure in place for that. I had to have a meeting with the store manager, Sue, who sat me down and said, off the record, "If this ever happens again, I'll break your ducking neck." And her, a whole bootlicker supervisor, omitted it from the meeting notes. I was genuinely too stunned to even respond. This was in 2008. She's passed now. And duck her the fat bully. I hope she's bubbling in eternal fried chicken oil. Story 9. I told my boss I was going to out a few hours for my child's medical visit. Her response was, "Don't you have someone at home to take care of that?" That would be my wife, I'm assuming. She's upstairs making 3 times what either of us make. Story 10. Was told by a manager to not get upset at an employee that would break the group's only printer because she had big boobs. To this day, I question why I didn't take him to HR. Story 11. I worked for a call center sub contracted by Verizon. An 82-years-old woman had a brain tumor and was set to go in for surgery. Son said she was taking some serious stuff to manage the pain and swelling of her brain. She was being called by a number from Jamaica. They have an area code that looks a lot like an American area code. So this old lady was answering the phone and yapping the ears off of these con men that were calling from Jamaica for hours each day. She did not have a long-distance cross-country plan, and so she was being charged for every minute she was on the phone or for each text she sent to these gentlemen. The amount was over $8,000. I immediately flagged my supervisor and let him know we would need to escalate the ticket. The son was calling, asking for a way to block the number and get the charges removed. My supervisor grabbed the mouse and clicked around a bit, looking at the account before saying, "Sup, nah, we can't help her. See here, we sent emails and texts telling her she didn't have a plan for this, and she kept doing it. Me. She has a brain tumor and is loopy out of her mind for medications. Sup. Doesn't matter, those emails and texts are our way of letting her know, and we sent so many of them. Me. She's 84. She probably only knows how to answer calls. I don't think she does texts or emails. Sup. Charges are valid, let them know." I began sobbing, took my headset off, and walked to the site manager to resign right there. I refused to do it. It's the only time I've ever quit a job. I tough it out most places 5 years. That place, that call center, was hell on earth. I know it's not quite what you were looking for. However, looking back now, I see it as comically evil. Story 12. The following is a real conversation I once had with a former boss. She engaged me at a time that I was doing some rather mindless data entry. Can't vouch for it being verbatim, but the gist is 100% accurate. Boss, what are you thinking about right now? Me. Just going over a grocery list in my head, haha. Boss, you're at work. You should be thinking about the work you're doing. Me. Well, I'm thinking about that too. This task just isn't something that requires a lot of thought. I'm just copying the info that's on the document into the system. Boss. I don't care. While you're at work, your thoughts should be on your job and nothing else. Me trying to act normal, but in total disbelief. How am I supposed to regulate that and only allow work-related thoughts to filter into my consciousness? Boss, I don't know. Figure it out. Me. Can I ask you a question? Boss, okay. Me. When you're at work, is work all you think about? I mean, do you never have thoughts like, I need to remember to stop at the store on my way home? Or, what should I make for dinner tonight? Boss, oh, yeah, I guess I do. Me. Okay, then if even you can't keep non-work related thoughts away, how am I supposed to do it? Besides, I get my job done every day, don't I? Boss, silent self-reflection. So yeah, I'm not going to even try. Just want to let you know that right up front. Scene, she was such a Karen, but even this time, she realized how insanely controlling and ridiculous she was being. It never came up again. Story 13. It's a toss-up between two. 1. You're delusional. I think your PTSD is making it hard for you to tell fantasy from reality. My boss was 30 minutes late for a meeting, and she asked me if I felt like we respected each other's time, so I said no. 2. I overheard you telling someone else that the adoption agency thinks you work too much to be a good parent. If that's the case, I should just fire you. This was the day I was told that my husband and I were on hold with our adoption agency until I fixed my employment situation. I took that note and the others I'd made to HR, and we reached a mutually beneficial agreement about my transition out of the org. Story 14. Instead of referring to me as first name, last name in an email, my boss's boss once addressed me as first name Git. My real last name starts with an M, but doesn't remotely sound like the word Git. Felt really awesome to know I was appreciated. Story 15. I finally was able to take a week of vacation 3 years into this job. Friday night, I ended up in the ER passing gallstone. Had to have surgery the following Thursday. I was supposed to have 2 weeks off for recovery. Filed my FMLA paperwork for the time off. Boss was pissed that I didn't trust her to hold my position open. A week after the surgery, she started pressuring me to return early. I needed the money, so I went back early. Felt like utter dog crap. My first day back, she came into my office and starts chatting me up about my surgery, digging for details. Then tells me her cousin got the same surgery and mine didn't sound anything like his. Demanded to see my surgical scars. So I pulled up my shirt and showed her the 4 incisions which still had the surgical tape on them. She was grossed out but finally believed that I had the surgery. After that, she started going after me for time theft. I wasn't, she just didn't like my time cards. And then she tried for embezzlement, paying vendors using accounting's approved method. I had receipts, literal and metaphorical, to prove my innocence in it all. I took everything to HR, showed them the harassment, and got moved to another department. I was laid off about a year later when the company hit the skids. I found out years later she had embezzled quite a bit of money from the company, was quietly fired, and everything swept under the rug. Story 16. I was told, I'm not going to miss you. 2 months later, they tried to rehire me. 3 months after that, they shut down the shift I managed due to large losses. Story 17. I'm Asian and worked remotely for a company based in Utah. We were in a weekly meeting after Orange Head's speech, and my boss asked me, how did the cats taste? Shortly after Liberation Day, the boss informed me on a Friday late afternoon that they had to wind down the company and wanted me to stay and help with it on limited hours. Reduced my hours even further in 2 weeks. Told me to tell everyone not to log in from Monday onwards. I just stopped logging in and ghosted them without doing anything. I did inform my team of what's happening, and I told them I won't be around anymore. So if they had any questions, they should take it up with the boss instead. Story 18. Drowning in work, short-staffed, 1 position available. We were looking for some qualified help. Ended up having to hire the VP's niece, who just started college. Undergrad in a dissimilar vocation. Made things worse, coworker tasked to train or find something she could actually do in an engineering-centric depth ended up getting fired because she said she didn't get taught anything. So now down 2 positions, all because we couldn't teach her civil engineering in 3 months. Story 19. I was an expatriate worker in southern Turkey. I am Canadian. When the area I worked in was struck by twin earthquakes of 7.8 and 7.6. I lived close to the epicenter. 60,000 died and over 1 million became homeless. My apartment building was damaged, as every house building in the area, and unsafe until an engineer could evaluate damages. I was homeless for 5 days, no food, nowhere to go. All hotels, restaurants, malls, etc. also damaged, of course. Dead people everywhere. It's the coldest week of winter. There is no electricity, running water, gas, roads, and airport damaged, so I couldn't readily leave. Employer said, we can't prevent you from leaving, but we expect everyone to stay. In the street, don't forget to log in your hours on the portal if you work remotely. You're expected to maintain your schedule. No one is allowed to take leave at this time. In the meantime, Local staff were digging out family members buried alive under the rubbles with their own bare hands until roads could be fixed and emergency crews machinery sent in. Entire historical towns and villages were erased off the map forever. Staff from my office passed too. After 5 days, the roads were fixed and I called my embassy to evacuate me since my office was grossly insensitive. I was denied working remotely from Canada for a couple weeks. I finished my contract and I quit. Story 20. My last job before I went full into business for myself told me it wasn't a 9 to 5, it was a do what it takes job. When I asked them to explain what that meant, they said there are no off hours. If you are finished with your work, you're not working enough. So I said, I don't understand because my contract says 9 to 5. They said that's the hours you get paid, not the hours you work. So I said, if I work late, you don't pay extra. How about weekends? They said, no, you get paid a salary, which means you get paid X, but you're expected to start early, stay late, and work weekends. I promptly quit. Story 21. Way back when I used to work for Lyondell, I had this terrible macho of a manager. My dad died of pancreatic cancer. His funeral was inconvenient. No crap. We thought so too. Resigned on a post-it. Story 22. I was trying to argue for some leniency regarding one of my employees' time out of office because her husband was passing of pulmonary fibrosis, which is a horrible, lingering death sentence. He'd already had a lung transplant, but he was rejecting. She had 3 young kids at home. The youngest gets was 5. My boss said, we're not giving her anything. We don't even know if she will stay here after he dies. It was so disgusting. After that, I told her any time off she needed, she was to just take and not put in an official request. If we got caught, I would take the blame. Absolutely vile. Story 23. I don't understand why you don't want to come in. When you work overtime, you make more money than I do. My normal hours were 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. She wanted me to come in at 10 p.m. to submit documents to Exudated. I had already been working 10 HR days, 7 to 6, to complete this project. Her yearly salary, $180K. Mine, $32K. Story. Due to COVID restrictions, everyone is working from home and required to use 1 PTO day a week to offset costs. Except for the desktop tech team, they need to use 2 or 3 per week, depending on if they're in the office, 2 or 3 days per week alternating. We not only were the only ones that needed to go into the office, but often still had to work from home on our PTO days to help the other team members in the office. That's probably too long to put in your painting, but this experience shifted me from having the work ethic of giving 110% at all times to doing the bare minimum for our corporate overlord, especially because the owner of the company has generational wealth in the hundreds of millions of dollars and could handle a couple down years for COVID for a 50 millimeter revenue a year business. We ended up doing better, revenue-wise, anyways. And on top of that, they took a PPP loan for building renovations and let people go, when the whole point of the PPP loan was to keep people employed. I could keep going. Lovely artwork. As a painter myself, I dig it. Story 25. Worked at a Best Buy. A customer left their dog in their car in the parking lot with the windows up, visibly not running, on a hot summer day. When the assistant sales manager noticed that the employees at the front end were distracted by this, he walked up and said, I would sooner go outside and snap that dog's neck myself than watch you waste more company time. Let's get back to work. This man was a master manipulator who would ask questions of you and just reply with, and the nod of a head and walk away to keep you on your toes. Would call people autistic if they didn't understand something he was saying, and call us pathetic if we didn't hit his sales quotas. Some people don't deserve the oxygen they breathe. Story 26. Worked in a crafty warehouse with no ventilation. Owner was a nepo baby jackass. Manager was a total a-hole who hated everyone who worked there, was a thief, and cheating on his wife with one of the gals in the office. I got kidney stones from working there. It was miserable. The doctor said it was caused by dehydration. He told me to carry a bottle of water with me at all times. When I got back to work, Mr. A-hole said that he didn't think that would be necessary. I told him, frankly, Mr. A-hole, you're not a doctor, and I'm going to follow the medical advice. I don't care what your opinion about this is, but I bet the doctor and the Board of Labor would love to hear about it. He ducking caved. Damn son of a Karen. Story 27. Just a few classics. Manager responses. 1. If you don't want to do your job, I will find someone that does. His response to my proposal to run a project to improve some processes. 2. I'm not swearing at you. A Monday morning call that started with a what the duck and followed by swear word filled rant about my team. He was upset because he couldn't a question asked by a division president. 3. We need to beat the deadline by several days was my manager's response after I explained that the team working on the project step before us was already 4 days past their deadline with no ETA on completing their task. We only had 10 days to complete our tasks in the project plan. 4. You need to plan better for holidays. My manager, after he committed my team on July 3rd to complete a couple of projects by July 6th end. Half my team, including myself, were on vacation for the 4th of July. Story 28. When I was leaving the company, because she changed my job description from graphic designer to mail clerk. She said that I wasn't good enough for the next company. Meanwhile, she wanted to know where I was going so she could call them up and get me fired. I told her I was going to work for Cutco, the MLM that sells knives. Sure enough, she was on the phone trying to get me fired from a place I didn't interview for. On my last day, one of the guys told me that she buys cars for employees so they don't leave. Sure enough, I looked at the license plates on the cars and saw half of them were from the same dealership. She was the micromanager from the pits of her. She'd get mad at me for doing something she'd told me to do 3 seconds ago, and she'd lecture you on how to write a post-it note correctly. Story 29. I went to clock out at the end of the night at a restaurant I worked at, only to see I wasn't even clocked in. I honestly thought I messed up and had just forgotten to clock in, so I went to the manager on duty at the time to let them know that I must have forgotten to clock in. He just casually says, "Oh no, I clocked you out about an hour ago to save labor." I was only 17 and really had no concept of labor laws and just said, "Oh, okay," and left. The next day, I went to the general manager and told her what happened. She fixed it immediately, and as far as I know, ripped a new one into the manager that did it. Never happened again. Story 30. Contractors don't get paid time off. New engineering manager called me up to tell me I was fired. When I asked why, he said my timesheets say that I've been stealing time. I said, "If you took the time to read my employment contract, you'll see that I negotiated PTO. Not only that, you'll see that if either party wants to terminate this agreement, it shall be via 60-day notice." Story 31. I gave my manager a month's notice informing her that I could not work a Saturday a month from then because I would be going to my great-grandmother's 100th birthday, and she bothered to ask if I could work at all, which I told her no. Unbeknownst to all of us, COVID hit a month later, and it would be the last time that my grandmothers were alive together. My great-grandmother passed 6 months later, with my grandmother passing not even 3 weeks after my great-grandmother. I still worked at the same place. Another instance at a different job, my first job. I had already turned in my 2 weeks notice, and on my very last day, I was scheduled a 13-hour shift from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. I said, "Duck that," and no called, no showed. Management went crazy, and I think 2 managers ended up getting fired in the ensuing craziness. One had a breakdown and walked out, and another manager had to be called in, but she showed up drunk. Story 32. Anything more than a handful is a waste, referring to my breasts. Or, when he was berating me in front of coworkers, I asked to speak in the hallway. "Why, do you want to fight?" Story 33. My old boss was this very angry little man who suffered from that real tough guy syndrome. Incapable of giving you an actual compliment. Showed you he liked you by busting your balls, blowing his top, punching walls, making lots of sexist jokes, etc. He had a field day with me because I was one of the very few left-leaning, non-meathead employees. One day I was making myself some plain old Lipton tea in the kitchen, and he dropped this one on me. "What's that, your special tea picked by one of 9 midgets on a mountaintop in Peru?" Story 34. When I was young and working at Burger King, one of the chilliest in-the-know coworkers I had said, "Come here, I gotta tell you something. Just a heads up, they're doing evaluations of everyone today. They're being a holes and telling everyone, you're just doing average, not good enough, just to goad you into wanting to work harder. Just ignore them and let it roll off you. Don't take it personally, they're gits." Sure enough, I was told with disappointment, "You're only doing average at your job." Great, thanks. On a side note, a year later, I spotted my boss inside a grocery store, hitting on a local escort and asking for her phone number. I had just passed his wife and kids in the parking lot, waiting for him to come out. Story 35. Former zookeeper here. I went to check on all my animals as I always do in the morning, and when I came to my sloths, my female was bleeding. I called into my walkie-talkie to my boss to come down immediately. I was then scolded, "You can't say on the walkie-talkies. We have investors here." Turns out my sloth was giving birth. We had no idea she was pregnant. It was a zoo where the animals were so well cared for, and the people were treated like crap. Actually, the crap was even treated better. Story 36. I lost a baby while at work, sudden and severe enough that an ambulance was called. This was a conception that took almost a year to conceive. I was far enough along that I had announced my pregnancy. My boss called while I was in the emergency room to ask me, 1, if I was okay, 2, if I was okay to still come in for my shift the next day. When I numbly told her, I didn't know at that moment. I think I was in shock, or I would have had a much different reaction. She said it was okay, as I wasn't that far along enough for it to really impact me, and I could always try again next month. I worked as a childcare teacher at the time. She said my students would really miss me if I stayed out for too long, and getting back to work quickly would help me heal. Story 37. Boss, I know you suggested Hannah for the promotion, but I pulled the security logs from the last year and she's only averaged 45-hour work weeks. John had averaged 65-hour work weeks, so we'll be going with him for the promo. Me, wait, but I really think that's only because John really just drags his feet. And 6 of those months resulted in the poor piping design for the reactor column that had to be entirely redone due to inaccurate stress calcs. Hannah did that redesign in 2 days, boss. I've already promoted John. Me, I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice right now, boss. Actually, today is your last day. Story 38. I don't care if you have a doctor's note, get under the drink cart and scrub. A week after I crashed on my bike and bruised the bone in my right knee. Story 39. I was pregnant and I avoided saying anything until I really started to show. When I was over 6 months, and clearly showing, my boss asked me about my birth plan, taking time off from work, etc. I said I didn't really think this was the best time to talk about, to which he replied, I know scheduled births are a thing, so can you have this baby on a Thursday? That way you just take 2 days off and you can be back at work on Monday. My jaw dropped. Story 40. I was a first-year master's student, fresh out of undergrad. This was before Craigslist and Facebook. A middle-aged woman was roaming the halls of the department asking if there was anyone willing to tutor her high school-aged daughter. Someone directed her to my office and I agreed to meet at her apartment once a week, but we neglected to discuss a pay rate. I walked over to the department chair's office and asked what he recommends I charge per hour. He shrugs his shoulders and says, $5. I was thinking more like $20. He then laughs in my face and says, I wouldn't pay that. He thought I should work for less than minimum wage for a job that requires specialized knowledge and training that I had. Completely out of touch, boomer. Story 41. Go through the stack of applications on your desk and call the least Hispanic and least black sounding names for interviews. I told him he'd have to fire me. 4 days later, he did. Story 42. I was let go after I landed a large account and the owner stepped in to take over because I wasn't experienced enough to handle an account of that size. I objected strenuously and was let go. When I was hired, I was given some books and several sample cases of our products to study and learn about. After about a week, I got a call from the owner asking for them back as they were costly to put together. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. I heard him boiling over and he says, read my lips. I want them back by tomorrow. I laughed and said, you're on phone a hole. I hung up and threw the stuff in the trash. Story 43. I was told by my former manager, you work for the state, you shouldn't expect much. After I noted that the pay was unlivable and I was overqualified. Within the span of 8 months, I had 2 new jobs and make almost double my original salary. Story 44. My ex-boss, M60, told my wife, who was also employed there, when we told him that we expect a baby, actually we told him much earlier than we were obliged to so he can plan with it. Don't make the same mistake like so many young women nowadays. Don't confuse your pregnancy with illness. As a result, my wife went to her gynecologist the next day and got a mandatory medical work ban. I hope this is the correct term. I guess we are quite privileged to live in a country where there are laws to protect pregnant women and mothers. Story 45. After having a row with a late-night shift manager at a fast food restaurant and walking out of the shift, I agreed to speak with the GM the next morning. After explaining why I clocked out and left, she agreed I was in the right about my issue with the shift lead, but that the only thing I did wrong was clock out when I left. I should have stayed clocked in for some reason. I actually laughed at her. I said, nah, I know for a fact it's like actually illegal to do that, and I'm supposed to clock out if I'm no longer working. I also declined to return even though she was willing to take me back with no penalties, schedule change, etc. Story 46. My old boss said, you need to decide what's more important to you, your job or your education. We worked at Noodles & Company. I obviously did not choose the one she wanted me to. Story 47. I was working in a movie theater like 25-ish years ago. We needed to carry new projector bulbs from the car near the front door into the lobby and upstairs to the projection booth. They were unboxed. I guess they were used bulbs from a different theater in our chain. So we were carrying the actual bulbs. They were big and expensive. The GIT regional manager hands one to me and says, don't drop it. I looked at him and as calmly and respectfully as possible said, thank you. I'm in the habit of dropping stuff people hand me. Thanks for the reminder. Then, that a hole tripped on the stairs and dropped his. The stairs had really thick carpet, so it didn't break, but still, story 48. I think you're just using your disability as an excuse for your communication skills. Said to me after someone with a hearing disability, said our weekly international calls were particularly challenging for me to hear everything. Pre-pandemic conferencing captioning. Story 49. This will be buried, but when I was scheduled for surgery for cancer, my husband requested the day off. His boss at the time knew the situation and still said, hell, we all got places we'd rather be. I'd rather be fishing, but I'm here. Yes, it was a weird family place, and my husband quit on the spot. Story 50. People die, life goes on, and there's a job to do. 3 bereavement days, then it's back to work. I was told this when one of the managers I supervised had her husband pass away unexpectedly. I ended up approving 3 weeks of PTO for her. Duck senior management. Story 51. You can't tell tenants to call codes enforcement. I was working for a property manager and owners were refusing to pay for work that was safety related. I told the tenants that the property owner was refusing to pay for work to be done and that their next step should be to call the city codes enforcement office, who could force the owner to do the work. My bosses were not happy when they found out I did that. People were literally freezing in 18-degree weather because their heat wasn't working or had sewage coming through their ceiling, and the landlords were refusing to fix them. I got out of that job as soon as I could. Story 52. Boss wouldn't take Teams or phone calls. We're all fully remote. Well, I'm not anymore. I left that place, hell yay. So a close coworker and myself sent a very detailed email about the challenges we were facing and the creative solutions we came up with to solve them, but needed his go-ahead action to follow through on them. We didn't just bring the problems, dude. We knew how to solve them, but couldn't without him essentially reorganizing some team members. Email response basically like, this is an unnecessary email. You know you can give me a call. This is unacceptable. Somewhere along those lines. He's the worst boss I've had in my 16 years of working life. 31 currently. Story 53. You're clearly leagues above these guys. Can you dumb it down for them? Context. Military Intelligence Unit. The irony of it all was not lost on me, LMIO Story 54. At the beginning of COVID, they had us all take pictures of our workspaces to share in a team-building chat. Worked in an HR-adjacent team. Mine was a little desk tucked into a corner by my bed with a window looking out over a lake. I was pretty proud of my spot. The moment it appears in the slideshow, the head of HR says, "Oh no, what a sad little setup. Sorry, some of us live in small apartments and don't fund medical wings and hospitals. Maybe if you paid me better." Story 55. Complaining about my pay. 28.5 per hour for a job requiring a master's degree and professional certification. You think that's bad? I made $19.50 per hour at my first job in Nate. Ma'am, this is not my first job, and adjusted for inflation, that's at least 50% more than I make now. Story 56. It's getting a little dark in here, don't you think? My old boss from Chipotle, who was a tiny Hispanic lesbian, who preferred to only hire cute girls and only hired a couple black people because corporate told her to. I reported her to the head office that night, and she no longer worked there after that. Story 57. Worked for an electronics sales company that had their own credit card. In a presentation to new hires, including myself, the store manager told us to look for the mentally disabled because they think it's all free money and someone will pay it off for them. After confirming what she said, I stood up, shoved over their table of credit card promo materials, and flipped her off as I walked out. Most of the 15 or so other new hires walked out too. Couldn't work for anyone that disgusting. Was so glad to see that company shut down. Story 58. I'm just trying to make you a better worker, said after a spittle-filled coke-fueled rage over my Excel spreadsheets, not having pretty borders while working on calculations for another document. Apparently someone might see me working on ugly and unprofessional, unformatted raw data since I sat up front in a private office with no foot traffic. I walked out and let them deal with the $20K discrepancy on the books that I am sure had nothing to do with the owner and his brother having a coke and escort problem. Same job I was told to expense off $6K for dinner at a strip club in Canada. Story 59. I hired you to look pretty, not to ask questions. After I asked why we were substituting in a cheaper, low-quality ingredient against company standards. Story 60. I do not accept a statement of resignation over email. It needs to come to me as a phone call. So I am considering this as a no call, no show, and terminating your employment. Whatever you say, boss. Story 61. A company I worked at sued one of its former employees. The boss was incredibly paranoid about stuff, and he believed this person was stealing company secrets. There actually were no secrets, but when they went to court, the boss went up on the stand, and the judge asked him to elaborate on what the company's secrets were that were supposedly stolen. And he said to the judge, "I can't tell you, they're secret." I mean, can you imagine? Boss: I would tell you, Your Honor, but then I'd have to kill you. Judge: Sir, you sell ergonomic staplers. Boss: and you'll never get our formula. Story 62. My ex was a data analyst for a health insurance company, and during a Zoom meeting, they were all introduced to a new hire from San Francisco. I guess he had a feminine affect, and her boss said, "Great, another on a hot mic." He immediately muted himself. He resigned the same day. Story 63. I once had a supervisor get frustrated and yell in the office that the flu season was worse than ever. When HR came to meditate a conversation between the two of us, they encouraged me to just consider her perspective and be more respectful and understanding of the circumstances in her life which have caused her to believe that are the problem. Story 64. Not to me, but to my coworker. Her child had a genuine medical emergency, so she took her to the ER. They ended up admitting the kid to stay overnight and for the next 2 days because she genuinely wasn't doing good. My boss had the audacity to be like, well, if she's stabilized, can you come in just to cover the first part of your shift? Like, dude, how sociopathic do you have to be to ask a mother of a sick child to come in while her kid is in the hospital? Story 65. We're hiring on the sign outside brought in applicants who had asked to fill out an application. This was the 90s. I would take the applications to the boss in his office. He had a camera showing the front of the store so he could see everyone who came in. If the applicant was black, straight into the trash can the application went, he wouldn't even glance at it. Subway Sandwich Shop, Asheville, Story 66. I used to be an assistant to a high-end architect, and he once asked me to buy his wife some lingerie. I asked him what size she was, and he said, "You're a lesbian, can't you tell?" Story 67. I worked as a manager at a tanning salon in my early 20s. My boss, who was married with children, kissed me on my mouth. I told him that was inappropriate and made me feel uncomfortable. He said that is how Persians show appreciation. He tried again, and I again told him not to do that. I was fired the next day. Story 68. Upon finding out our coworker lost her baby, the first thing our boss said was, well, now we don't have to worry about covering her maternity leave. We were stunned, speechless. Along the same lines, not a boss, but a client who refused to work with one of our colleagues because she was pregnant and should be at home. Well, she specialized in what he needed, so dude was out of luck. Story 69. Several times, it was becoming a bit of a catchphrase. Manager was the hiring manager and would say laughing, I have to talk to those pimps now. He was talking about the recruiters that placed us all. In other words, he was calling us prostitutes to our face. Story 70. Do you want to take this outside? I really want to hit you. In front of my coworkers after, when she told me to send an email asking our drafting department if they had her maps done, I sent an email that said, hey, Sarah wanted me to ask if the maps for this project are done. Turns out drafting hated her, and she wanted me to ask as me so they'd be more willing to finish the work early. Wonder why they hated her. What's the most cringy thing a boss has ever said to you? Story 1. I had a boss that told me, I'm the biggest idiot in the building, and your job is to keep me from ducking up too bad. I miss working for that guy. Retired several years ago. Story 2. Not a boss, but a college professor in a leadership class. He gave an assignment about who to hire in a situation where we were at risk of missing a deadline for a big order. Someone who had experience but a bad attitude. Someone who had qualifications and a good attitude but no experience. Someone who wasn't qualified and or hire nobody. Bear in mind, the scenario literally ended with the question, what would you do? I said I would hire the second candidate and wrote the required amount of paragraphs defending my choice. I got the assignment back with a B grade. The professor told me that the right answer was not aware there was a right answer, was to hire nobody, wait for a better candidate, and have people work overtime to keep us from missing the deadline in the meantime. I had a problem with this response to my assignment, so I emailed back. If we're already at risk of missing the deadline, why do you think the solution is not hiring anyone and gambling on a perfect candidate who didn't turn up in the original round of interviews? He said that training someone would take too long and we would lose time training them, so it would be better to wait to hire someone. I said, yeah, but at least that person would be trained for the next time we have a deadline, and a good manager should have known we would be short-handed before we got to this point. It's not fair to make people do overtime because of management's mistake of taking on too much work with not enough workers. He said, it could be voluntary overtime. I said, I work in a factory now. The people who would be willing to do voluntary overtime already work overtime. He said, well, in manufacturing, workers have friends who work for competitors. They could ask their friends to work for us instead. I said, I work in manufacturing. If you were my boss, I wouldn't tell my friends to come work for you. For anyone wondering, no, he didn't change my grade, and I didn't think he would. And I started this exchange by saying, I didn't care about the grade, but it was just so demoralizing to hear that argument from someone whose job is teaching future leaders and managers. Story 3. I used to work with a guy for a couple months who we'll call Black. We worked 3/12s a week in a climate-controlled tent, because hot glue, and literally 95% of the time interacted with nobody but each other. I told him on the first day that we're going to become best friends, not because I really needed to or wanted to be, but because we had no other choice to get through the weekend. I just got home from his baby shower 2 hours ago. Introduce our supervisor. We'll just call him White. He's a good boss in the sense that you're allowed to bend certain rules so long as you're always at work and making numbers, but is actually hot garbage if you ever really needed anything. So a few months into the gig, during some Sunday morning downtime, an obviously older and somewhat larger fellow, we'll call him also Black, came into the tent to speak with Black. Prior to this moment, I had never met, seen, or otherwise recognized also Black in any meaningful way. As I said before, I spend a good 95% with Black, sometimes to include breaks, so I see just about everything on the clock. So White enters the tent, and without skipping a beat, this mother ducker says, "Is that your uncle?" Silence. Eventually, White exits the tent without incident. It's awkward, of course, but also Black leaves as well, and we carry on with our day. Not long after, Black says to me, "Was that awful?" I'm typically pretty open-minded and understanding about a lot of things. So, what I decided was something to the effect of, "Look, at this point, I don't think he looks down on you or treats you any differently in any meaningful way, depending on how much it's bothering you." Story 4. Him. "We have to schedule emergency overtime." Me. "All right, I'll ask the crew for volunteers, but I can't be here Saturday." Him. "What makes you special?" Me. "Okay, I'm not, but I have to replace my meal back door since it broke and the 10-degree weather is blowing through her living room, and they are old." Him. "You need to get your priorities straight." Me. "My family is a priority. Duck off, I quit. Packed my crap and walked out that night." Story 5. Not my boss, but my HR manager at the time. She was an older lady, low 70s, and I was in my mid-20s, working at an econometric consulting firm. I should probably add some context here. I grew up sort of poor. I say sort of because I always had food, clothing, and a roof over my head. Doesn't matter that the food was poor quality, the clothes were hand-me-downs, and the house was tiny. I had what I needed, and it was a happy childhood. I was very lucky to be able to go to college and got a nice IT degree. Anyways, for those that haven't actually jumped social class in the US, it's way less common than we're led to believe. I figured most coworkers had lived my same childhood. Turns out, not so much. So anyways, I jumped on an amazing opportunity to work in our newly opened office in Paris, which had no tech positions at the time. I worked for 2 weeks and then took a week of vacation to explore, meaning many of the biggest expenses were footed by the company. When I got back, I ran into the HR lady in the break room and she asked me how it was. I started gushing, basically because I had never had an experience like that before. I told her I'd never been out of the country before, and she asked, "Not even growing up?" I was like, "No. We didn't get to travel much when I was a kid." She goes, "Oh, did your family have a business they couldn't leave?" And before I realized it, I just said, "Oh no, we were just poor." The next 30 seconds can only be described as a human sloth, as she was confused, apparently, by what the word poor meant, and then slowly came to understand what I was saying. Cue awkward muttering, and then we go our separate ways. That was when I started asking coworkers about their childhoods and realized nobody shared my experiences. Story 6. When I worked for an insurance company many years ago, I was the point of contact for the renewal department. I handled communication between other departments and mine, with internal and external sales agents, and the occasional customer as well. I reported to a manager who reported to the VP of Risk Management. With the exception of medical decisioning on renewals, I was trusted to answer all communication with minimal oversight. Everyone was happy. They restructured my department a bit, and my manager was moved to a different line of business. I still did work for the old manager on occasion, but now reported to the VP. I changed my email CCs to include him. Within the first week, he was grumbling. By week 2, he was fuming mad. He came and asked me what the hell I thought I was doing sending out responses to all these people without his approval. These were routine inquiries that I had been answering for almost 4 years now, without any assistance from anyone. I still made sure to refer medical questions to the UWs. Week 3, I had deferred all questions but the most basic to him in the UWs. That still wasn't good enough. He came storming over to my desk and told me enough was enough. I was to stop answering all questions and phone calls. He told me I was a data entry monkey and nothing more, and to start acting like it. Leave the decision-making to the big boys. I was preparing to quit when my old manager, other debt managers, and the Uves all spoke to him and let him know I essentially did everything but medical decisioning and was doing the work of several people and had been point of contact for 4 years. He never apologized to me for the monkey comment, but he backed way the hell off. Story 7. I had a boss who told me, "I put everything I make from this company back into it because you're all family." And within the same conversation, he told me, "My wife wanted the porch, so I got her the porch. Beautiful car." He tried to make it out that he doesn't make any money off the company because he puts every penny in, but it takes 2 seconds to see through that BA. Story 8. Little backstory. I had a job a few years ago as the only engineer for a small family-owned solar panel sales company. The majority of the employees were door-to-door salesmen who would schedule appointments with potential customers. Then I'd design the solar system, create a proposal, and an estimate. Then a senior salesman would return with what I prepared and give them the pitch. It would take 1 to 2 hours, so we'd have 3-5 of those appointments every day. At the time, we were probably making 2-3 sales a week. So the owner one day came to me saying, "We need to be making more sales." His first idea was that we needed to schedule more appointments every day. I told him that's cool, but he needs to hire another person to help me because that's too much work for one person. I was already super busy because I was also doing a lot of the back-end paperwork, managing all the projects, and doing most of the customer service. He responds, "Well, last year we had one person handling all your current responsibilities, and we made 5 to 10 sales every week. I don't see why you can't do the same." So I had to explain to this man that first off, it's literally July 2020. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People aren't as loose with their money during something like that. Second, it doesn't matter how many sales we make. I have to prepare a proposal and estimate if we make the sale or not. And third, I'm not the salesman. It's not my fault you talk with a customer for 3 hours and don't get the sale. I remember in the moment being so confused that a 45-year-old business owner couldn't understand such simple concepts. Story 9. Probably when I was written up during that big snowstorm a month ago, I called her 10 hours before my shift. Basically, as she came in and told her IDK if I can make it tonight, because we were going to get 7-10 inches of snow. And I have a small car, very not suited for snow, and she tells me it'll be okay. I told her that I'll take her word for it. I get ready to start my car. The snow has calmed down, but there's like 8 inches of snow down my entire street, which is about 600 or so feet before the main part of the village. They usually plow our street last. I call her and tell her my car won't move, and there's too much snow. She tells me I have half an hour to quit being lazy and start shoveling, or be written up. So I said, okay. After not liking her attitude, I decided to turn off my car and stop caring. I'm an underpaid anchor. She can't fire without having the whole contract bust and everyone losing their jobs. I call her half an hour later and tell her that it still refuses to go. She says I'll be written up. I say, that's it? Expecting like docked pay or a coaching later, and she just hangs up. I come in a few nights later, and she just starts nagging to me about how I'm a lazy piece of crap and all I wanted was an extra day off while she had to work a double, and that if she had more people, she'd phase me out super fast. Story 10. Not really said, but action. At one point, my boss told me that his son was looking for a girlfriend. I kind of laughed it off until he brought it up again. At this time, I'm about 18 and didn't really have interest in dating because I felt like it would be awkward. But he was about 45 and pretty good looking, showed me a picture of his son. The son came in one day and we hit it off. Nothing really came of it, but my boss then would buy me lunch a couple times a week and offer better hours whenever I needed or wanted extra money. Just glad he didn't offer a raise. Just before he switched stores, I got into a car accident. Nothing serious, small fender bender, but with my health issues, it hurt me seriously and I still went into work. He literally bought me dinner, looked at my car, made sure I didn't have a concussion, even called my mom. All while I'm on clock sitting on a chair at self-checkout. So as I'm doing my job, he tries to comfort me by buying ibuprofen and Tiger Balm and splints for my already broken limbs. Eventually, I just kind of accepted it because I was absolutely miserable. Once my dad got there, my boss kind of disappeared upstairs. My boss eventually came back down and shook his hand, said my dad had a great daughter and anyone would be lucky to have me, etc. Now my dad's not a big guy by any means, but he's badass. My dad clocked me out and my boss transferred a week later. Apparently he was testing me to see if I'd be a good young wife. Who knew? Story 11. First of all, I worked there for a long time and had a 3 months notice with quite a good pay. My boss was a dishonest git who generally confused income with revenue, and the company went under hard recently. He offered me a 50% pay cut to consider and told me to think about it while he went on a 3-week vacation with his whole family. If I decided not to take the new deal, my 3 months notice would start from the day of the conversation, not the day of his return. In calendar terms, it meant he basically wanted to cheat me out of 1 month's salary. When I pointed it out, he said, a notice is just a piece of paper, meaning he can ignore the laws, put whatever date he can, and I can't do crap about it. I was basically ready to quit for a while, so I said, well, I got a piece of paper of my own, and put my notice right in. Like literally took it out of my pocket and put the date in front of him. The main difference was, my notice had some legal technicalities listed that he recently failed to comply with, and it meant I could walk out there, and then with him owing me 3 months' salary, the larger amount before his taxes as it was a fine now, and not payment for work, and a few other fines amounting to around 6 months' salary I got there. Took 6 months to win in court, but I'd say it was the most costly piece of paper he had to sign in his semi-successful role as an employer. Story 12. I was working on another crew temporarily, and the boss was a neckbeard. He was younger than me, but had been surveying longer than me, so he had that over me. One day I was talking to him like I would anyone. I say what I'm thinking and don't hold back, and he got offended by something I said. I don't remember what. I just remember him saying, yeah, but I'm above you. Sorry, Jeff, but you will never be above me. You look like Fat Git from Austin Powers after he lost all the weight at the end of the movie. You smoke like a chimney because you have no confidence, and drink until you can't make it back to your own room and are pissing in garbage cans. You're a bully who intimidates the younger guys that work there. No, sir, you will never be above me. Side note, I quit that job like 18 months ago. Maybe about 10 months ago, I saw that guy at a gas station while I was driving around delivering food. I pulled up in my car and cussed him out in front of another guy I knew and used to work with. He wanted me to get out of the car and acted like he was going to fight me. I told him no because he wasn't going to do anything anyways. I'm not going to stand there and have a white guy showdown with you. If I get out of the car, I'm gonna start punching your fat ass. Story 13. I don't know if this counts, but here goes. For context, one of the cooks at this restaurant Elle used to work for lost his home in a fire. He had nothing left as far as material things, just maybe his car. But in essence, he and his family were homeless and feeling anguished. He came to work to explain his situation and what he is going through. And our GM responds, "So you can still make it for your shift tonight, right?" Story 14. First job was working at an ice cream store. My then boss was a middle-aged man who had a cringy habit of making inappropriate advances toward myself and the other male staff, and was also extremely sexist and rude to the women at work. I'll never forget one night, it was just him and I operating the store, and he was training me as the new assistant manager. He asked me to come into the back of the shop to show me how he wanted me to close up, etc. He then gets down on his hands and knees to demonstrate exactly how he wanted me to empty and clean the water drains for the store. And in doing so, he bent over all the way to reveal he was wearing a hot pink thong in place of typical men's underwear. Cue my jaw dropping and my eyes rolling to the back. I was definitely not prepared for this kind of thing. Without missing a beat, he looks back at me all sheepishly, and without me asking or prompting him, admits, "I like wearing thongs because I prefer the way they feel." Proceeded to nope myself out of that situation as fast as I could. Story 15. I worked at the headquarters for one of the large cosmetics stores out there. I had the worst boss I've ever experienced. He was good for a few. Off the top of my head, he showed up 15 minutes late to a meeting and made us start over. Sorry guys, I had to argue with a mechanic because of the amount he wanted to charge for my kid's Mercedes. You won't believe how much those things are. We all were struggling. 2. I was going through a divorce. I found out my wife was cheating on me. It obviously distracted me a bit at work. He came and told me that my teammates were all complaining about me not pulling my weight. I went to apologize to them and explain. They didn't complain. When I confronted him on it, he said, "Well, I noticed. Your personal life should never impact what happens at work. Leave that at the door." Story 16. This one is beyond cringe and just downright infuriating. Backstory. Manager, at that time, has a wife who was pregnant with their first. They lost the baby in her 3rd trimester. They were devastated. Many of us witnessed his grief and crying. I was also pregnant at the same time as her and had my baby about 2 months after they lost theirs. After my maternity leave was up and came back to work, I had some issues with childcare and was late a lot. That was my problem, not his fault at all. He asked me one day why I was late so much. I told him I'm having babysitter issues, but that I was working on it. He said, "I'm so glad I don't have kids." This was the same manager that lost his own child just a few months prior. His wife worked in the same store, different department, and regularly passes by our department. She didn't hear him say that, but she easily could have. I never saw him the same way again. This wasn't his first moment, and definitely not his last. He eventually got fired for some of his stuff later on, not related to this specific event. Story 17. I know you and your family could use the raise with the baby coming, but if I gave it to you, I'd have to promote you. And if I promoted you, I'd lose you and you'd do a great job of picking up the slack. Story 18. I had a boss chew my out because I didn't know something she never told me. One time I was going to the bathroom and stopped to say hi to someone in the hall. She came out of her office and told me, "Get back to work." Then another time a team member needed some help, so I was tasked with helping her out. The VP stopped by our boss's office and asked how things were going. She got up and said, "Let's go check." Boss and vice president come over, interrupt us, and ask. We say we are on track to finish by the requested deadline. My boss looks at me and says, "Get back to work." I responded, "I was working before you interrupted me." She walked off and my coworker sent me an email with, "Get back to work." She got fired. She was trying to fire me, but the company knew I would sue them into oblivion for the obvious hostile work environment and sexism I experienced under her. Crazy story. Story 19. I once had a boss ask where my holiday house was. He was shocked when I told him I didn't have one. "Why not?" he asked. When I said, "Because my salary is my only income," he looked confused, then angry. It boggles my mind to think there are people among us who think that everybody in the world also gets family money. But at the same time, I think it's somewhat pitiful that a grown-ass man in his late 50s is still financially dependent upon his parents. Story 20. 1. You are not entitled to express your opinion. Walked out of the office and was stopped in the parking lot. Manager then had to explain to the owner what he said. 2. I got on Facebook and told so-and-so they needed to got bed they worked today. 3. At 5 a.m., I was once verbally coached that I was to smile more to my coworkers. 4. I watched 2 managers tell a woman who hurt her back lifting a box that she could not got the doctor. Then, when I intervened, they threatened to fire me. They hesitated when I smiled and said, "Do it." 5. During the pandemic, work gave us a hazard raise of $2 an hour. I was told they were paying me $2 extra, so I needed to work extra hard. I was doing the supervisor's job without supervisor pay at the time. So many more, but these are my top. Story 21. My boss at my first official job, an older lady, asked me if I was pure. I was 21 and living with my boyfriend. I don't know why she thought I was, or why she thought it appropriate to ask. Story 22. This was during an argument I had because I demanded a home office opportunity. During COVID, we've been working from home most of the time, since it was demanded by law. So the only one in office was one of my two bosses. After home office was enforced for the second time by law, my boss literally blew up on me, demanding I had to be there because he doesn't want to be lonely. And then, the most cringe part, he came super close to me, telling me he wants us all to be this close, and after stepping back, that he feels like Corona divided us this much. I was lost for words. Story 23. I used to work for a small tech company and was prepping to visit a prospective client for a sales meeting with my sales director, also co-founder, and another rep. Part of my job was to research the client, so I looked her up on LinkedIn. My director saw that the person we'd be visiting was an attractive woman. The first thing he said was, "Damn, let's make her airtight." I didn't have a clue what that meant until he explained, "No, the three of us can stuff all her holes, make her airtight." I actually ended up taking a 6-month medical leave not long after and then quit, mainly because he was such a narcissistic jackass and I couldn't handle working with him. Oh, also, one of his favorite cringe lines was, "Do as I say, not as I do." Duckin' hypocrite. Story 24. We had broken down on the side of the interstate at around 9:30 p.m. He explains that the radiator cap had blown off a ways back, and I remind him that he was supposed to have that fixed over 2 weeks prior. He had been driving around with gallons of water for 2 weeks because the cap wasn't sealing properly. I then point out that he is barely in the emergency lane, and he should have pulled over further. He looks at the traffic zipping by and mumbles something about they should be merging to the left lane to make a buffer right lane. When he finally dropped me off at my house around midnight, he said, "See you tomorrow." And I replied, "Okay." Never showed up for that crap show again. He can keep his conservative talk show on all the time now without me pointing out his ignorance. Story 25. Working at a restaurant. Boss, I need you to focus your attention on X thing. Me. Why is this something we are suddenly caring about? Boss, my boss wants it done, and I won't get my bonus if it doesn't happen. Me. So you want me to work harder on X thing when it doesn't really matter so you can get more money? Boss. Yes. Me. How much of this bonus do I get to see? Boss. Realizing he isn't going to win none, walks off. I did do X thing a little bit because I actually did respect my boss, but I'm not going to bust my ass so that he gets a bonus and I get jack crap. I can't remember what X thing was, as this happened like 12 years ago. Story 26. I rubbed my former boss's boss the wrong way because I regularly said that I didn't believe in a 40-hour work week, especially if all my projects were ahead of or on schedule. He was a workaholic who regularly worked 80 hours a week and expected that if we weren't working 50-plus hours, there's no way we could get the work done. My boss told me in our one-on-one that I needed to just appease his boss until my time in that position was over because even though nobody he knows in the company likes him, they still listen to his opinions, and he could tank my career. Thankfully, I got into an entirely separate division of the company where no one knows who that person is, and I'm doing just fine working exactly what hours I need to get my projects done. Story 27. Just 3 years ago, trying for the 10th time to explain to my boss how their social media presence was non-existent, while he complained daily they needed more marketing customers, only for him to again say, "I'm old school, it never used to be like this, I know everyone." We both were close in age and worked in the industry at the same time, for some of the same people and places, yet he just couldn't fathom that times had changed. Having to actually post once a day on social media was apparently hard. His alternative to marketing, having his friends come in, get half if not all their crap for free, and hopefully word of mouth would build their business. They closed last year. Story 28. Asked M. You need to stay 3 hours after work Tuesday to cold call potential customers. No, I'm not doing that. You know I have class after work on Tuesday. If I have to stay after hours, I can stay Wednesday. We can't do Wednesdays because Manager M goes to the casino every Wednesday and you know that. Work comes first, always. Me. Not after 5 o'clock, it doesn't. Then school comes first. I'm not skipping class to make cold calls. Cue the next day, M. You're being written up because you had the nerve to tell him that school comes first. Do you have anything you want to say for yourself? Me. Nope. Seriously? Sign here, acknowledging this then. I quit a couple weeks later. Duck that bank and those managers. Story 29. I had a boss who spent all day basically doing a craft project. She was CEO of a small 30-person company. She stayed in her office all day, printing out stuff from the internet and putting it in a binder. She was basically scrapbooking information the rest of us could just Google. Then she came out, and we all had to ooh and ah over her binder. Then she said, "I'm so exhausted from all this strategic work. I'm going to head home and probably will be out tomorrow golfing. You can run the show for a few days, right?" She basically depended on me in my 20s with no business experience to run her company, and I did. Then I left, and within a year, she had to close the business. Story 30. Big corporate, well-recognized name company. The billionaire owner speaking to a room of us. You're the meat. That keeps... I don't really remember what his analogy was, but he referred to us a meat several times. Another company, bigger corporation, some CEO talking to a couple hundred of us. We have laid off of you, and productivity has gone up X, and we look forward to continuing in that direction. I had to look around to my left and right to see why the employees weren't objecting. Because all the old-timers had tons of stock, and the stock prices were going up like crazy, and they were all cocky holes and thinking, well, it's not going to be me. So good. A lot of those people were wrong. Story 31. Newer boss. This new comp plan is an incentive, and you will make much more. I would have loved this plan. I compare plans have to double the number of sales with the same number of leads to break even, but if I only increased it by 200%, I could have tripled my salary. Oh, and it reset every month. Normal volume month meant 50% pay cut. I was already working 12-hour days and on weekends to produce what I was. Boss was there for 12 months, and there was a mass exodus from that division. The people that stuck it out were rewarded in the end with a new comp plan and more leads, but the stress was not worth it. Story 32. Not me, but my husband used to work for a slimy husband and wife duo at a small company. They would routinely find ways of underpaying and screwing employees out of their commission, refused to let anyone work from home throughout the pandemic, tried to withhold paychecks, etc. Last year, they were gone for about 4 to 5 months of the year, vacationing on their private yacht. And during the first all-hands meeting this year, the boss says, well, we were gone for a few months last year and made record profits. I think the best thing is for us to go on even more vacations this year and let you guys keep doing the hard work. My husband quit shortly after. Story 33. Worked as an EMT back in 2010 the week I started. They unionized boss, changed all the schedules from 224s or 312s to a regular 9 to 5 with 3 shifts a day. He told everyone he didn't care about EMTs, they were a dime a dozen. He only cared about his paramedics and nurses. I think there were maybe 3 or 4 nurses and like a dozen or more paramedics. But there was 4 or 5 offices and like 9 EMTs working out of each office, each shift, and maybe 1 paramedic or nurse out of each office. And some shifts, the closest paramedic nurse was 30 minutes to 2 hours away. Also, side note, the paramedics and nurses kept their 24s or 12s. Story 34. Me. Sir, I'm pretty much working 70-hour work weeks and have a 3-hour round-trip commute. I'm handling servers belonging to other cells, and I can't keep this up forever. Boss. Well, just because the deputy says you don't have to work your 40 hours, you can work more. Me. Sir, I'm concerned the team lead isn't pulling their weight. It's just me and the senior analyst handling things, and I'm managing the intern. Boss. Well, team lead is the service lead. His job is to make sure the service is running. So is he going to help us with our op tempo? Boss. He's the service lead. You have to make mission. Story 35. Me, freelance IT contractor. I'm leaving early on Thursday as I have to go and pick my wife up from the airport. Boss. Why can't she get a taxi? You need to remember who pays your wages and get your priorities right. Me, annoyed. My family will always be my priority, just as it was for you when you took 2 days off last week because your son was ill, and last month when you left early to go to a school event, and the month before that when you took your mother to the hospital. Curiously, after this, we had a really good working relationship, to the point I was actually a bit sad when she left. Story 36. When I told my boss I refused to train a second position that I do, IT camera video pulling, because we would share a pay scale, and no one trained me. It has taken 2 years to learn how to be efficient at my job. He told me well at Burger King. Burger flippers train other burger flippers. Second story, same boss as above, has been with us 6 months. I explained in depth the issues I was having with our camera systems and what IT needed to do. I asked him if that made sense. He said, that all sounds like China to me. Make $20 an hour, he for sure makes $50. Story 37. I hired you because you're getting your master's. I want to show you off to other departments. She got fired within 1 month of my hiring. Her replacement was an awesome boss. He told me after my 6 months with the company, I need to find another job because there wasn't anything else I could learn or move up. He helped with my resume and helped me ace my interview. He always said as a manager, it is his duty to help me help you be successful. And even if it meant I had to get a new job. Story 38. From somebody previously in the military, you sure don't work like it. When I was a dog groomer, because in between my dogs, I would sit at my table and relax instead of go out and help the cashiers. Hire more cashiers. Okay, John, I worked my ass for a decade, doing everything from my job in the medical field to shoveling 5 feet of snow off company walkways where saying no would result in disciplinary action ranging from a counseling statement to jail time. If I want to ducking relax for 10 minutes, I can do so because you can't do to me what the military could have if I said no. Story 39. I was 6-7 months pregnant with my daughter at the time, and one of the regional managers was at my workplace. He and I were having lunch together in the office, and we were having small talk about the job and about life. In a pathetic attempt to hold the conversation, the regional manager asked if my pregnancy was planned. Maybe he thought it was appropriate or okay to ask because my husband at the time also worked for the company. I don't know how else to possibly view it, but it was incredibly awkward and just such a weird thing to ask. Story 40. My boss, who makes $200,000 a year, told me, when it comes time to pay for your kids' college, you'll find a way. I have 2 young kids and do not make anywhere near that. Story 41. We rolled an old school bus full of tree planters down a really steep embankment on the way to the block. I hit my head so hard, I don't even remember getting out of the bus. Think I broke someone's collarbone with my skull, but I was okay after I came out of my daze, like 5 or 15 minutes later. They were taking people out of the bus using a folding table as a stretcher when the camp boss came by and asked the people who weren't seriously injured if we wanted to still plant some trees today, even if we're a bit shook up. Priorities. Story 42. Teacher here. Current boss and I were having a conversation, and he mentioned the DC Sniper. He said that in his early teaching days, when the DC Sniper was active, all the teachers lined up as human shields to protect the kids getting on and off the school bus. I nearly laughed when he said this because it sounded so ridiculous. The DC Sniper hit people at random, making everyone an equal target. He went on to say that this was a good solution to that problem. Now I know my boss 100% expects me to volunteer to be hit if there is even a hint of danger. Story 43. You are stupid and not worthy of working for X company. I was his best performing employee, but had caught him cheating on his wife. He was the absolute worst human I have ever worked for and should have been fired for harassment, multiple offenses. Finally was forced out after being promoted like 5 times. Story 44. I had a coworker who was harassing me and calling me names in the office for months until other coworkers were actually complaining at how uncomfortable she was making them. We had a meeting with the department manager and the store manager. Store manager says, ultimately, you're in control of your feelings, so she can't upset you if you just don't let her. Department manager looked at him like the total git he was and says, that is not how any of this works at all. Story 45. I worked for a massive insurance company as a telesalesperson. The top head of the company would ask for questions via email to be answered in front of all of us in a public forum fashion. One question was, do you think it's acceptable that your salespeople have to rely on unguaranteed commission to top up their basic wage so they are able to live month to month? His answer, well, I think everyone needs to budget better. This guy had a private yacht and stood in front of us all with a very dark tan from his 3rd golf trip wash holiday that year. Story 46. Had a new manager start at a crappy retail job I had after uni. His first day, during his first meeting, he gathered all the staff to tell us we were overpaid compared to the job they did. He'd half out wage if the decision was his. We were all on pennies over minimum wage and had the highest profits of any store in the region with the lowest overhead. Within 12 months, almost all the staff had gone. He only hired teens with no experience so he could boss them around, and the store became one of the lowest earners in the company in Story 47. She tried to text me about something that went wrong with payroll on my day off. I had been off for 2 days. And then when I said I had no idea what she was talking about, she was like, you sure? Because this sure looks like some ducking bullcrap you'd do. I didn't even reply her because she had been bullying me for a while. Then she texted me again saying, I'm sorry, I'm on my period. I need to chill. I walked out the week after. I don't even do payroll. She was just a Karen. Story 48. I'm not sure if this is the sort of thing you meant, but once I put in a 2 weeks notice when I was working for a corner store, they definitely didn't even deserve the notice, BTW. I used to do opening shifts since it was my preferred one, and no one else wanted to get up at 6 a.m. The last day of my 2 weeks, my boss called me asking if I could open the store the next day. I said, no, I don't work for you anymore. When I refused, she started crying. Pretty cringe. Story 49. I had a boss in insurance tell me that we do not follow the golden rule, but instead follow the platinum rule. I asked what this was, and he said, do unto others what they want us to do unto them. He then proceeded to explain that the customers did not come there for us, but for the brand's take on things. Then he told us what the brand wanted us to tell the customer, which was definitely not in their best interest. I think I will stick with the golden rule, as that one can't be manipulated. Story 50. I was in a depression slump, which affected my work. My manager, who is salaried, told me, well, maybe you should just take a leave, in a passive-aggressive tone like I was stupid for not considering it. Karen. If I take a leave, I'm not getting paid and I don't get to eat. That makes the problem so much worse. I lost so much respect for her that day. I don't joke around with her. I don't talk to her about anything besides work. It's just business now, and even then it's only the bare minimum. Story 51. I find the whole do this extra work but don't spend any time on it thing creepy and from another reality. An example boss, late Friday afternoon, Review this document and come to review meeting first thing Monday. Me. So you want me to work overtime this weekend? Boss. No, me. Do you understand English? Major weapons manufacturer. I hadn't been working there long and I didn't understand the culture. I only half-jokingly explained that my religion didn't allow me to work unpaid. After we had that sorted out, we got on fine. Story 52. A family member was brutally hit. It was on the national news. I got the call about what happened as I was stepping into work, so I was a mess and went to talk to my manager for guidance about trying to get some time off for the funeral since I was out of PTO at that point. Oh, too bad they're not an immediate family member and you don't qualify for bereavement. Now fix yourself and go back to work. We need you, was her response. I quit within a month. Story 53. This was my favorite, and keep in mind I work in a skill-based industry. Boss. 40 hours a week is what we expect from our bottom performers. 50 hours a week is my personal minimum expectation. Top performers should be putting in at least 60 hours a week. Me. Do you consider me to be a bottom performer? Boss. I looked at your gate logs over the last 6 months, and it looks like you average 47 hours a week, so you tell me. Story 54. I am a software engineer, and during our interview process, we need to do coding challenges. Every other applicant could do this at home, but I needed to do it at the office. I got the job. I never understood why my process was different. 2 years later, I found out that my boss thought that because I have a specific nationality, which I don't want to mention here, I must probably cheat in the test and get help by family and friends. That's why he wanted to monitor me during my test. Story 55. You're too good at your job. I'll never promote you because you're good in your department. And when I started going on job interviews and they asked why I was going to leave my job, and I replied, I'm so good the manager refuses to promote me out of my department. That looked ducking fantastic for me. This manager quit just before I did. The day he left, I asked my customer at the register to wait one moment, did a literal happy dance, and explained why I was dancing. They danced too. Story 56. Once told my boss I had a family emergency and couldn't come in, and he was like, oh, I shouldn't have to cover for you. It's my only day off, and you need to call the store instead of texting me. Like, okay, I just walked into one of my family members hanging from the ceiling. Duck your day off and duck jumping through your little hoops. What part of family emergency do people not understand? He only apologized after I screenshot the text and threatened to expose him. Story 57. Who bought this low-effort crap? Director of a retail brand management company. I participated in a 20-pound limit Secret Santa and received the director's wife, who also worked at the company. I bought $25 worth of premium chocolates for her, and apparently that was in poor taste. This director owned a Tesla SUV and luxury Mercedes and was converting the back of his home into an office complex. I was a territory manager earning $27K a year. I realized there and then how pathetically out of touch he was from reality. Story 58. After everything we did for her, we gave her a job. I guess she doesn't appreciate the favor. In response to the 2.8 waitress threatening action over tip theft by management. A favor would be giving someone money in exchange for nothing, or someone laboring for nothing. Employment is not a favor. You hired her to do a job, which she did well. Then you took her credit card tips. What's the favor here? Story 59, from the 95-year-old former owner. His son now owns it. So have you found yourself a nice man yet? You'll want to have those kids before you hit 30. Have you gotten married yet? A different variation on this almost every week for the first year I worked there. He stopped after I finally came along with, I'll have kids when I'm financially able to care for them myself, which is a lie. I don't plan on ever having children. Story 60. When I worked at Starbucks, my partner and fiance would come in and grab a coffee. I was obviously happy to see them, would greet them with a smile and stuff, because they're my partner. One time after they visited, my manager pulled me to the side and told me I needed to treat all the other customers the way I treat my partner. Her actually wording was, I see how happy you are when partner name comes in. I want to see that happiness for every customer. Gross. What is the dumbest thing a boss has ever said to you? Story 1. I do a 12-hour shift, night shift in security, and it is time to go home. Instead of my relief, the mobile supervisor shows up and asks me to do another 8 hours if possible. Illegal. I say I am exhausted and won't be able to. He says, take a 30-minute nap in your car, and the coffee is on me. I refuse this crafty offer and go home. The bugger had to do the entire 8-hour shift. Story 2. Not me, but one of my colleagues offered his opinion on a problem only to be told, you're just a driver. When working for Pizza Hut, went from being a helpful and productive team member who was happy to chip in where he could to responding to every request with, no, I'm just a driver. Story 3. Think of your overtime as a raise. I didn't want to work overtime. I wanted my time to have value. I wanted to go home. I was working 70 plus hours a week for $7.75 per hour changing oil for people who hated me. The breaking point came when the franchise owner, who owns a string of those places, showed up in an RV with a price tag of over $500,000. 10 years I could have worked there and never made that much at 70 hours a week at my pay. I'll never forget that. I quit that day. They called me later begging me to come back. I did not come back. Story 4. 2008, companies making record profit, no raise because it's based on last year's numbers. 2009, no raise because this year's projected profits are low. Story 5. You don't look stressed out enough. Proceed to acknowledge, I get everything done on time, and they love the work, but you don't look like it's hard. Yes, that's what emotional stability looks like. Story 6. I had to request off for some school events that were a class requirement, but outside school hours. I made the request as soon as events were announced and always in plenty of time before schedules were written. About midway through the semester, I wasn't given the requested time off, so I found someone to trade with me. The store manager himself stepped in to deny to the trade. I went to see him as instructed in the trade denial, and he informed me I was asking for too much time off. Then he added, you need to get your priorities straight between work and the school. It just so happened that our division of the company was headquartered in my hometown. It was also a fact that the wife of the head of corporate HR for our division was a teacher's aide in one of my classes. The next day, I careened quite loudly about the situation to one of my friends in her room. She asked for clarification, and I explained the entire thing to her. When I went to work that night, I was sent straight to the manager's office. The HR head was there and let me know he clarified some policies to the manager and that my remaining requests had already been approved. It was glorious to see that he had been at least somewhat knocked down a peg. Story 7. I worked at a pizza place and our oven was malfunctioning. The repair guy said it would need a new safety valve and the GM said, can you just bypass it, which would have made the oven dangerous to operate and possible explode, killing everyone. The repair tech said no. Story 8. Psycho director tells her boss in front of me that Nutella Zamboni's poor management skills are the reason department is failing. I took a voluntary demotion to get away from her. A couple weeks later, she is terminated due to our department imploding, her harassing a longtime vendor, complaints from her subordinates, complaints from site administrators, mishandling a water main break, ignoring 68 alarm calls, etc. Story 9. Abandon your shopping in the supermarket and come into work on your day off to fix a server. I was buying food for my kid's 5th birthday party. Told him to get lost. Story 10. I got hired onto a place at $12.50 an hour. The woman that hired me quit about a week after she hired me. I got my check 3 to 4 weeks later at $10.50 an hour. I went to the administrator and he brought in the new supervisor, and I told him I didn't get hired for $10.50. I want the $12.50 I was hired at. He told me, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. I said, yeah, there is. You can remove me from the schedule. Supervisor looked at me and said, you can't do that. The hell I can, I laughed in her face and got up and left. Dumb Karen. Story 11. I was day shift 6 a.m., 6 p.m. Monday, Thursday. Sometimes I'd work Friday. They stated they need me to work Monday, Thursday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., then Friday and Saturday, 8 p.m., 6 a.m., have off Sunday, then back to days. When questioned why, it was because the night shift guy said he wouldn't work overtime. I declined and they got mad and stated they were asking to be polite, but they can add my name to the schedule if they decide. I told them to go ahead. They can put it wherever they want. I'm still not going to come in. It took another few years for me to quit. I never worked an extra day after that, but that one day left a sore taste. It was a fairly large reason why I ultimately quit later. Story 12. I worked at a deli when I was in college. I called out of work sick once, and my boss asked me, can't you just take some NyQuil and come in? Yes, he specifically said NyQuil. To come in for my job operating a meat slicer. Story 13. But why would no one come in today? Don't they need cupcakes? Context. Day before Hurricane Sandy hit. My boss made me keep the shop open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It was only me working, and we only made $600 that day in sales. She was shocked when I told her that cupcakes don't count as an emergency food source. Story 14. I have to wear the same uncomfortable shoes all day too. Dude, you sit in your office in those shoes. I have to walk 20K plus steps in 4 hours throughout the warehouse. Story 15. My dad died this spring, and when I called my boss to tell her what happened and to confirm bereavement leave, I'm fairly new, so I hadn't had a chance to see if anything was different from previous jobs. She said, well, we have a lot of people out on PTO this week, but if you want to work from home so you don't have to worry about coming into the office, that's fine with me. I'm thinking, Karen, my dad just ducking died, and the last thing I'm worried about is covering for other people's vacation. Story 16. A very senior member of management claimed that he had survived COVID-1 through 18 back in his day, and that the 19th version was not going to be a challenge. When someone pointed out that the 19 stood for 2019 and not the 19th version, he insisted he was wrong because he had contacts in the health department. To this day, I have no idea how he managed to become a top manager while always being so confidently incorrect all the time. Story 17. I had a boss that I quit over. He supposedly had a PhD in chemistry, as do I, and I'm convinced he must have bought his from a diploma mill. We were working on a synthesis, and a microwave reactor would have really helped. He told me to go to Walmart and buy a microwave for the reaction. I explained to him that microwave reactors work under extreme temperatures and pressures, that it was not safe or appropriate to use a microwave meant for the home to heat closed containers with volatile acids. It was a deadly. He admonished me for not being a team player and said he'd get the microwave himself. I don't know what the guy is up to now. I resigned not long after, but yeah, that was the dumbest thing I heard from that guy. Story 18. My boss, the vice president of it, who has a CISSP certification, said this when I pointed out that his team opened a huge vulnerability in our jet aircraft maintenance application. You just have to trust people. The vulnerability would have allowed anyone with the publicly accessible URL to ground every aircraft and outfleet. Story 19. I once had a manager that said, completely unironically, there's no difference between fear and respect. Now, those who know their history know that tyrants generally don't last that long in power, with a few exceptions, but that's a matter for another sub. This guy lasted 40 years, but the only reason is because he was the boss's best friend. So after numerous well-written complaints from the majority of the staff about his tyrannical behavior, the boss finally decided enough was enough and let him go last month. He played the victim, then warned the boss the company would be driven into the ground without him there to keep people in line. The new manager is making sweeping changes, is communicative, and will always hear you out if you have a concern or complaint. He's very hands-on and professional, and we had our first staff meeting in 12 years. Company morale is way higher. And honestly speaking, things are going just fine now. But I will say this, I didn't respect the old manager. I walked on eggshells around him. He was a tyrant. I couldn't stand him, but due to his childish tantrum-like behavior, it spurred me to finally go back to school. So I'm starting university in the January semester so I can stop working a blue-collar job I hate and start doing something I actually enjoy. Story 20, that I would get to choose between child neglect, not picking my kid up from sitting, or patient abandonment if I didn't work mandatory OT an extra 4 hours on top of the 12-hour shift commitment I fulfilled. Story 21. I worked for a pizza place. I was 6 months pregnant when I got the job. I thought my boss knew because I took off regularly for doctor's appointments and had outright mentioned it. I was 8 months pregnant when he told me to tuck in my shirt. I said that I couldn't. He threatened to write me up. I told him I couldn't reach to tuck it. I asked if they had maternity so that it would stay tucked. We wore aprons over our shirts so no one could see anyway. He said I wasn't pregnant, I was just fat, and that I needed to tuck my shirt in. I asked if he wanted to tuck it in. The look on his face when I showed him my sonogram. Story 22. Had to attend a meeting at Place A. Boss told me I also had to attend a meeting at Place B at exactly the same time. I pointed out that that would not be possible and was told to make it work. Went to the meeting at Place A. Got pulled into the boss's office the next day to be berated for not also attending the other meeting. I asked how made it work, for future reference. You just make it work, was the idiotic reply. Thankfully, boss has left the company because breaking the laws of space and time is tough. Story 23. During a performance review, an old boss told me that he had to score my review on a different scale than everyone else. He said I would have rated perfect in comparison to everyone else, and he wanted show me I still had places to improve. My average scores were 3.5 on a 4-point scale for his review. I was young and dumb, and I teetered between trying to figure out if it was an underhanded compliment or if he was trying to make me look less spectacular to our corporate overlords. In retrospect, I should have gotten him to put that in writing on the review. We didn't like each other professionally or personally, but he had to put up with me because I was the lead cook and I did most of the day-to-day hard labor of making our line tick. Story 24. Refused to perform personal care on a patient that had specifically stated that they could only have PC done by the same gender. Was reported to care director and told my reason doesn't matter, and with a slight condescending head tilt and tone, you can't think of them as people. There were some good staff there, and we used to joke that if the company did an advert for themselves, their slogan would be, "It's not assault if the dementia makes them forget." This was at the beginning of my career in healthcare. And the moment I moved into healthcare training, I told every group that came to me from a dementia setting, people with dementia might forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Story 25. I used to work with very conservative evangelicals. I have a whole lot of crazy comments at my disposal. A lot of my coworkers were very interested in MLMs, so much so that they would have MLM parties in the break room. My supervisor would sell the nail sticker MLM to clients during work hours. I refused to buy or participate in any of their MLM activities. Towards the end, my supervisor walked around telling other coworkers that I did not sell MLMs because I was lazy and lived in a dirty house. I left about 3 weeks after that. I could not go to HR because she was the center director and was HR. I probably could have gone above her, but chose not to. Story 26. We had GPS installed in our company vehicles. I was driving the most direct route on a rural road when I came upon an accident and a police officer directed me to turn. Each block was like a mile, so the detour took a bit of time. About halfway through, my phone rings. It's my supervisor, so I pull over and answer. "Why are you cruising around in the desert? Get back on the main road immediately." Why are you sitting at your desk watching me on GPS? Story 27. I worked in a dog kennel and there was a fluid leak going into a few of the kennels. So I started moving the dogs and my boss says, "No need to move them. Dogs are smart. They won't drink it." The leak was antifreeze. Story 28. I can only get worse at my job as I gain experience because I'm a creative. And creatives are only good when they are young and full of ideas and new to a job. You immediately become stale and are no good after that. I quit and took the other designer with me. Story 29. You don't have the right qualifications to be promoted to trainer with the raise. But I'm training people anyway. Immediately stop training anyone. When asked why, sorry, I'm not qualified for it, so I wouldn't want to have an issue. Boss's boss is like, "Wait, what? I thought you were a trainer." And there's no qualification requirement. I was like, I want the raise title and back pay for as long as I've been training people to become a trainer. Otherwise, I'm just doing my job. I left 3 months later when they wouldn't give it to me, but wanted me to still train. Refuses to train people still. Story 30. Sayx, I'm worried about your work productivity. She says to me after rostering me on a loan to cover the Christmas rush whilst manning the now combined photo lab, entertainment section, customer service desk, lay-by and returns desk at Kmart. I smiled and told her I was going on my mandated break and left. Story 31. Worked at a fast food restaurant my senior year of Has for some extra spending, cash, and rent. I became the head cook and trainer for new cooks. Most of them were pretty good and didn't need much direction. But this one guy, he was my age and didn't like being taught how to cook by a woman. Well, he got out on lunch rush with me and at one point starts getting freaked out and pulling chicken products out of the fryers early, like half-cooked poultry, and serves it. I flipped out, started explaining to him that the drive-through time didn't matter because compared to having E. coli or food poisoning, the customer would prefer the wait. We get through the rush and my manager comes in and says to me, "You shouldn't be talking to him like that. He knows what he's doing. I trained him." And at that point, it clicked. This ducking idiot trained that kid to poison people. So I quit saying, "You want to serve uncooked food? I'm out. I quit. I'm not getting fined or fired for getting people sick." She proceeded to try and tell my district manager I was having a mental breakdown and freaking out over nothing. Manager finally asked for my side and agreed with me. Story 32. My boss at One Gas told me that taking 12 days off in a year was too much. Employees have 6 weeks paid. I said I have Crohn's. I think I'm doing pretty good. He said we aren't going to hire you on as an employee from a contractor because of your medical condition. I said I don't think HR would like that. He said HR would thank him for saving the company money. A year later, his wife got cancer. A year after that, he was fired for this and a dozen other issues. Story 33. Sent to cool home early because she had a fever of 101. Manager said that I shouldn't have done that, and it was only because it was hot in the kitchen. This was 2 in the morning and cold as crap out. I told her neither her nor I were qualified, nor paid even remotely enough to determine someone's health, and that if she has a problem with it, I can ask what the Labor Council thinks about keeping someone with a high fever, during COVID especially. She est fou. Story 34. Context. We had just worked out that all the female staff in my team were paid X salary and the men were paid Y, with Y being 10% higher than X for doing the exact same job and all roughly the same level of experience. We also joined at around the same time we made a bit of a fuss. And before anything formal happened, all the ladies got called to individual meetings with my boss. Now, I'm not a dress fancy and wear makeup to work kind of gal, but on this day I had a particular meeting and I had made more effort than usual, including wearing a skirt. I get called out of my meeting and told I'm getting a 10 more pay increase, with him deftly glossing over the reason, and him ending the meeting with, "I bet you'll be wearing a skirt to work every day if this is the effect it has." Story 35. I worked at a government facility a while back doing finance work. We had to do PowerPoint presentations on a quarterly basis that were fairly comprehensive. To save time in the larger audience, we would go through the slides in detail one-on-one to ask the highly specific questions so that time wouldn't be wasted in the meeting going down a rabbit hole. Smart practice, emo. Anyways, a new director would cycle in every so often, and this new one was a bit special. I crap you not. They picked up the PowerPoint presentation, looked at it, put it back down on the table, looked me dead in the eye and said, You printed this upside down. Story 36. My last pay raise was a pay adjustment, and my boss framed it as if the company is actually paying me what my work is worth. Turns out my new pay rate is just on par with what the new hires are being paid. I'm no longer doing any extra work. Talk about your wages. Story 37. I was managing a gas station and my district manager asked me to postpone my wedding because the district was short-staffed. I told I'm unable to reschedule my wedding because plans have been made. He told me, you have no choice. You're salaried management. You have to work based on business needs. So I handed him my keys and walked out. Had a job lined up the next day. Story 38. I have a job where I need to be a top performer to win market share. Thus, your goal is always to be the top ranking company by state. My literal entire job is performance-based. At my last weekly meeting, we were discussing my methods and how some of them, while they differ from what she has recommended, have yielded better results and therefore won more market share. You know the entire goal of my position. My boss then told me, results don't matter, procedure does. I remained utterly confused. Story 39. One time my boss angrily ordered me to stand up from my desk and stop using the computer, apparently so that I could supervise more. I got almost no job done the rest of that day. I work in sales. I use the computer to message clients, check inventory and prices, write up quotes, send and receive images of parts, invoices, etc. Story 40. That me continuously stepping up to help and volunteering for extra responsibilities didn't feel genuine, like I'm only doing it in hopes of being paid more. Well, yeah. Story 41. While I was sweeping the carpet, my boss, trying to embarrass me in front of clientele, tells me that I'm sweeping the wrong way. I just laughed and looked, how does one sweep the wrong way? And her clientele also laughed at my response, and I could see visible anger on her face. Priceless. Story 42. My former nurse director hasn't been a bedside nurse since 1982. She was in management from 1982 up until about 7 years ago. We were really short-staffed, and they were offering no incentives for overtime. So she had what she called a fireside meeting, where we could discuss our issues with the unit and possible solutions. At the end of said meeting, she looks at all of us and says, keep in mind, she were in her late 60s, early 70s at this point, so nursing had drastically changed since she was actually doing patient care. Back in my day when I was a bedside nurse, we didn't just work for the money. We picked up extras and came in on our days off, sometimes without pay, simply because it was the right thing to do. She expected this to motivate us to do the right thing, but it was the most ducking, tone-deaf thing ever. And less than a year later, she was forced to retire when staff satisfaction scores came back abysmally low. Story 43. That my sick day accrual doesn't carry over to the new year. It does. He also didn't think it was illegal to skim tips from the employees. It was. Luckily, I stopped him from doing that. Story 44. I had a boss who said that I wouldn't have food poisoning. From food I ate the night before because food poisoning happens instantly as soon as you eat the food, so therefore I must not be sick. But as he didn't have the authority to deny a sick day, even if I wasn't sick, he guessed it was okay if I didn't come in. I definitely did have food poisoning, and he was definitely a ducking git. Story 45. Years ago, at my first job at Arby's, I came to my manager and explained to her that I was starting a new medication. This medication had a high probability of giving me the craps, making me very mucousy, and making me nauseous for the first 3-4 weeks I was taking it. I explained all this to her and told her that I may be in the restroom more often than I usually am because of all these symptoms. Skip to 3 weeks later, my managers sit me down, including the one I discussed this with, and tell me that I'm slipping and not doing what I'm supposed to. Can you be a little more specific, I ask? Well, you've just been in the bathroom constantly, dude. I went off boys, told them what for. Story 46. Once took a half day to drop my then GF, now wife, to an airport which lacked public transport options from our city as she was traveling to a small European country for work. Not only did I take a half day's holiday, but I also arranged cover as I was the manager. My boss, business owner, advised I was clearly not a team player, and my job should always come first ahead of my personal life. I have worked to the letter of my contract there and then every other company since, as this was my light bulb moment. Story 47. I was in the military doing an exercise when a warrant officer tasked me and 3 others to construct the barbed wire fence around our camp perimeter. Me and one of the other members of the work party were pretty large and muscular guys. The other 2 were pretty small and not very strong. I took charge and divided the work like this. Me and other big guy would operate the post pounder and drive the fence posts into the ground. 2 little guys would lay the barbed wire out since it was light. In 2 hours, we were halfway done the task when the WO comes by yelling at us to switch jobs since it wasn't fair only 2 if us were pounding posts. I explained this was the easiest and most efficient way, and that as a former subcontractor in the trades, I am more than capable of delegating work. He threatened us with extra duties if we didn't it his way, so we traded spots. The little guys could not lift the post pounder, so after another 2 hours, we made no real additional progress. Wu was not happy when he came back, and I explained this was why we needed to do it my way. Same Wu later tried to get 10 men to manually lift a 2,000 libs generator off the back of a transport truck rather than wait an hour for the forklift. I told him if he had ever tried to organize work like that on one of my old crews, I'd have fired him, and he's lucky the military is not actually based on merit. I'm still proud of those extra duties I earned that day, and my fellow soldiers were happy I was there to advocate for them. Nobody else would. I wasn't even their section commander. Story 48. I sold memberships at a gym and won awards for membership sales, blah, blah, blah. Boss one day decided he wanted to do an event and wanted me to go to local restaurants to get donations of food. I was like, I'm not comfortable with that, and I'm here to get members, not food donation. Boss responded, you don't have a choice, in a parental tone, and I calmly took my name tag off and said, oh, yes I do, I quit, and walked out. Story 49. We would be having a discussion, and every time I'd point out something he disagreed with, he'd say, I'm not trying to argue, but you are. No matter how many times you say it, you are arguing with me. Quit trying to gaslight me and claim I'm the problem here. Story 50. My title was Senior Business Systems Analyst. I'm very good at what I do and am an excellent analyst. I got a new manager, a woman, that I figured out pretty quickly was sexist against women. She told me point blank a week into working for her, I don't like working with women, they're just too emotional. I mean, more sexist words have been spoken, but it still floored me. And it put me in a crafty position where if I reacted, I proved her right. Anyway, she sat in a meeting that I hosted where I asked our client about their needs and outlined proposals to meet those needs with a software update. Also in attendance was a much less experienced man in a lesser position than me, and he had questions as well. We worked together really well, and I liked being on projects with him. My manager pulled me aside later and told me, your role in these meetings should be taking notes. If you spend so much time talking, it doesn't allow John to get his work done effectively. His work, I'm the lead on this project. I got a new job shortly after that. She managed a group of 15 men and 0 women and has kept her job to this day. So crafty story 51. I once got written up for violating a procedure that didn't exist. I rebutted the write-up saying this, which didn't get my write-up taken away, of course. Then, they created a procedure to deal with the exact situation I was in. The procedure was to do exactly what I had gotten written up for. I pointed this out and my manager threatened to write me up for insubordination. Story 52. I was driving a fleet vehicle. It started making a grinding noise and shaking while in gear. I called the shop and told them to let the boss know I was taking it to our mechanic immediately, and I will call back as soon as I have more information. When the boss hears about it, he calls me to ask what's wrong with the car. I tell him what I experienced, that I'm waiting in line for the car to be checked out, and I'll let him know ASAP when I find out more. He tells me, it's my car, I want to know now. So I repeat myself. He gets enraged and starts screaming, loud enough the guy at the front desk can hear him. It's my car. I have every right to know what is going on with it. Now tell me. I repeat myself a third. He says he doesn't care what I have to say, unless it's telling him what I did to the car. A truly brilliant statement to make. I ask my boss if he wants to speak to the manager, since that's who I'm waiting for. B says yes. I hand the garage manager my phone and don't even have to explain because he was listening to the whole thing. Garage manager was always great. He tells my boss exactly what I just told him 3 times. The noise, the shaking, the waiting my turn in line, says, thanks, will do, and hands me back the phone. I asked my boss if he heard what he wanted. He says, yes, I did. Maybe next time if you drop the attitude, we can figure things out calmly, and hangs up. Fun fact, it was a family business. The boss was my dad. Story 53. At 20, was working for a collection company. Dumb. Thought it was going to be cable arrears for Rogers, but they asked if I was up for a bit of a challenge, so I said sure, thinking it would be sales. I got on the floor and the job was collecting medical debts from Americans. It was horrible. I was already radicalized to the point where I was never going to make this happen, but needed a job and was hoping at the end of the day, I'd just tell them this wasn't my kind of challenge. After first few calls, the supervisor asked why I hadn't had any collections yet, so I just told him, look, I just think it's wrong. So he walked away down the aisle, turned around and started marching and saying, medical debt is debt. Debtors must pay. Medical debt is debt and make them pay today. It didn't even feel real, and I just left. Story 54. When I asked for a pay raise, I was told that I didn't care about the mission. Karen, the mission is to make enough money to eat and to sleep under a roof. Story 55. It was my second day as a tool toter for a job. I was hired as an apprentice and started learning. During the first week, me and my lead man got into a fight because I should be doing everything he can, and I should already be at the next house, installing and welding. After I throw all his crap off his truck, including his tools, I proceed to get a ride to the shop. I speak with the owner, who states, "Well, he's been here longer, and if you can't find a way to work it out with him, then you'll need to find a new job." I left the conversation confused as to why a new hire that's never held a torch should be up in someone's house, learning how to start the flame on his own, and why I'm paid less than half of my lead man's. Yet, I should also be doing his job for him instead of learning from him. I was hired as an apprentice, but expected to be the leader, story 56. If you're not smart enough to do this, dude stopped himself mid-sentence when he shouldn't have said anything at all. Git is too socially stupid to manage and doesn't even know. It should go without saying that you don't insult someone you're trying to train.